This is part 84 of C# tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss a simple real-time example where a queue collection class can be effectively used. In part 82, we discussed the basics of the queue collection class, so please watch part 82 before proceeding with this video. When you walk into a bank or a passport office, you will collect a token from the token machine and wait in the queue for your token number to be called. And let's assume in this office we've got 3 counters available to serve customers, and notice that at the moment counter 1 is serving token number 2, counter 2 token number 1, and counter 3 token number 3. And at the moment within the queue we have 3 tokens waiting to be served. And let's assume at this point the representative at counter 2 has become available. And then when he pushes this next button, we want the token number that is present at the beginning of the queue to be served by that representative at counter 2. So basically, when this person hits the next button, 3 things should happen. First, we want to dequeue the item that is present at the beginning of the queue. And then that token number should be displayed within the green box here. For example, the message should be something like token number 4, please go to counter 2. And within this text box under counter 2, we want to display the token number, in this case token number 4. So that basically indicates the representative at counter 2 is serving token number 4. And in the meantime, when new customers walk into the office, they walk up to this token machine and they click this print token button. At that point, we want to print the next token number and we want to enqueue that to this tokens queue. So basically, as representatives at these counters become available and when they click their respective next buttons, we want to dequeue tokens from the token queue. And as new customers walk into the office and when they click on the print token button, we want to compute the next token number and then we want to enqueue that. So this is one example where a queue collection class can be very effectively used. Let's look at this in action. First of all, we need to design this form. So let's flip to Visual Studio. So let's use a table. And then I'm going to set the style attribute. First of all, I'm going to set font family to Arial. And I'm also going to set border, and I'm going to set border to 1 pixel solid black. And then I'm going to align the text in this table. I'm going to basically center align the text in the table. Alright. And let's close this table. Let's include a TR, a table row, and within this table row I'm going to have 5 TDs. In a bit you'll understand how we are going to make use of these TDs. And let's make 3 copies of this TR. So 1, 2, and 3. So in the first TR and in the first TD within that TR, I want to display text counter 1. And I'm going to leave the second TD blank because we want a space between counter 1 and counter 2, and similarly between counter 2 and counter 3. And look at this, everything within this table is aligned in center. That's why we have included that text align center there. Okay, so let me copy this and then put inside third TD, and let's call it counter 2 and counter 3 in the fifth TD. So that should give us something like this. Alright, the next thing is in the next TR we need text boxes. So a text box under counter 1, counter 2, and counter 3. So let's include those text boxes. So let me drag and drop a text box, and let's make a copy of this one. Let's actually flip to the design mode. I want to set back color of this text box to blue and fore color to white, and we want to set font size to large. Okay, and let's change the IDs. And one more thing that I want to do is set the width of these text boxes to 150 pixels. Okay. And let's change the IDs to meaningful names, something like txt counter1, and similarly the second text box to txt counter2, and the third text box to txt counter3. Alright, under those text boxes we need button controls, as you can see here. So let's go ahead, drag and drop 3 button controls. So let me copy that. So let's call this btn counter1, btn counter2, and btn counter3. And let's flip to the design mode. Oh, let's see, there is some error rendering the control. That's basically because we have the same ID. So let's change that to counter2, counter3. Alright, and let's set the width of these buttons also to 150 pixels. And let's change the text on them to next. Alright. Now, after the button controls, what do we need? We need a text box control. So what I'm going to do is have another tr, and then I'm going to set td call span equals 5, but then I'm going to have nothing in this tr. That tr is basically going to give us that space between that td and that one there. Actually, we don't need that, so let's get rid of that one. And within this td, I'm going to include a text box control. And maybe let's call this txt display. Basically, this text box is this one, the green text box. So let's flip to the design mode, and let's set the width of this text box to 500 pixels. And let's set background color to green and faux color to white, and then font size to large. Okay. Now, after the text box, we need a list box, a button, and a label. Okay. So let's include another tr, and let's include a td, set call span to 5, and let's make 2 more copies of this tr. Okay, so in this tr we are going to have a list box. So let's drag and drop a list box. Maybe let's call this list tokens, because this list box is going to store the token numbers. And let's set font size of this list box to large. And then we need a button. So let's drag and drop a button control, and let's call this button print token, and the text on this button to print token. Okay, and finally we need a label control. So let's drag and drop a label control, and maybe let's call this LBL status. Let's get rid of that default text which says label, and let's set font size to large. Okay, so we have the required design now. Alright, so at this point, when I click this print token button, what should happen? We should be able to compute the next token number and then add that to this list box. And behind the scenes, we'll be using the queueCollection class. Okay, so the first thing here is I'm going to create a queue class, and token numbers are of type integer. So I'm going to create a queue of integers, and I'm going to call this queue tokens. And then I'm going to store this in a session variable. because remember, web applications work on a stateless protocol. So if you want to remember the state of the queue, you have to store it somewhere, either in the session variable or in the database or somewhere else, or in an XML file. So let's use session variable. So I'm going to use the key called token queue. You can give it any meaningful key. So session of token queue equals queue tokens, and I'm going to do this only if there is nothing in the session variable. So if session of token queue equals null, only then create a new queue and store it in that session variable. Alright, so when we click this button, what should happen? We should retrieve that queue, tokens queue, from the session variable, and then compute the next token number to be issued and add it to the list box. Okay, so let's retrieve it from the session variable. So queue of integer, give it any meaningful name, let's call it token queue, and we need to typecast that. Whatever we are retrieving out of the session variable, we need to typecast that to be of type queue of integer. Okay, now the first thing is, look at this. When a new customer clicks on print token button, what should happen? We should first tell him how many customers are there in the queue before him. So, and how do we get the total number of items that are present in a queue? We can use the count property, and we want to display that within the label control. So basically I'm going to say lbl status dot text equals this text there are. So how are we going to get the count of tokens that are present within the queue? Token queue dot count property is going to give us that, but we need to convert that to string, so that can be appended with this string. There are how many ever customers before you in the queue. Okay, and after this, what we need to do? We need to compute the next token number to be issued. But how are we going to compute that? Look at this. Let's assume if there are no items in the queue at the moment, then we need to start at token number 1. Okay, so to remember the last token number that was issued, I'm going to use another session variable. So let's say session of, give it any meaningful name, but I'm going to call that last token number issued. So obviously this will be null the first time. So if session of last token number issued, if that is equal to null, that means we haven't issued any token number yet. So at that point, what we are going to do, we are going to store 0 inside that session variable. And then we are going to retrieve the value that is stored within the session variable, increment it by 1, and that will be our token number that we want to issue next. So let's say int next token number to be issued equals whatever is there in that session variable, increment 1. So that's our next token number. So what should we do at this point of time? Let's store this next token number in this session variable, so that next time we can compute the next token number to be issued correctly. So we are storing this back, incremented value back in the session variable. And then what we are going to do now, we are going to enqueue that next token number to be issued into this tokens queue. So we are going to use this enqueue method and then pass that next token number to be issued. Okay, so we stored that within the token queue, but what is the most important thing to do? We need to display the items that are present within the token queue within the list box control. So what I'm going to do is, so the ID of the list box is list tokens. If there are any items within that list box, clear them out, and then loop through the items that are present within this token queue and add those items to the list box. For that purpose, I'm going to use for each loop. for each int, let's call it token in token queue. So we are going to loop through each token number that is present within the token queue, and then we are going to add that to the list box. So list box dot items dot add, and to this function we are going to pass the token number. I'm going to use this overloaded version where we can pass the item as a string. So let's convert the token to string. Okay, now this piece of code is going to add the items that are present in the queue to the list box. Now we'll be using this piece of code elsewhere, so I'm going to move that into its own method, and to do that I'm going to right click on that code, and then I'm going to select refactor. Let's do that. First of all, we select the code that we want to encapsulate into a function, refactor, and then select extract method and give it a meaningful name. Let's call this add tokens to list box. And look at that, it expects a parameter of type queue int, because you give it a token queue, and whatever items that are present within that queue, all those items will be added to the list box. Okay, all right. So let's run this. At this point, we should be able to add items to the queue. Look at that. When I click print token, look at that, there are 0 customers before you in the queue. There was nobody, so that's why it said there are 0 customers. I'm the first customer to be served. So if I click it again, there are 1 customers before you in the queue. There are 2 customers before you in the queue, and then that token number gets added. So when a representative at the counter becomes available, and when they click this next button, we want to dequeue the token numbers that are present at the beginning of the queue, and then give it to the representative at that counter. So let's see how to achieve that. Let's flip to Visual Studio. So when we click this button, so when a representative at the counter clicks the next button, what should happen? We should be able to retrieve the token number that is present at the beginning of the queue, and then within the text box, this green text box, we want to display this message, token number 4, please go to counter 1 or counter 2, depending on which representative has clicked the button. And then we want to display that number within that within the respective counter text box. Okay, so but for anything to do, we first need to retrieve that queue from the session variable. So let's go ahead and do that. And we have already that code here. So let's copy that and paste it right here. So we are getting the token queue from the session variable. And then I'm checking if token queue dot count, if that is less than 0. What does that mean? That means there are no token numbers within the queue, meaning there are no customers waiting to be served. So at that point, we should display a message in the text box, maybe something like no customers in the queue, something like that. So when I click this the button at counter 1, so when I click this button within the text box, okay, txt counter1.text, we should display a message stating no customers in the queue. Okay, now actually this condition should be less than or equal to 0. Now on the other hand, if it's not a 0, or we can simply say 0, because if there are no items in the queue, the count will be 0. So if it is 0, we want to display this message, no customers in the queue, within the text box control. Else, if there are items in the queue, then what should happen? The first thing is to dequeue the token number from the queue. So int token number to be served equals token queue dot dequeue. And what is this method going to do? It's going to remove the item that is present at the beginning of the queue, and that will be stored in this variable. Okay, so once we have dequeued that, first thing we want to display the token number within that text box. So txt counter1 dot text equals token number to be served dot toString. And the next thing is, in this text box we want to display a message stating token number, whatever is that token number, please go to whichever counter. Okay, so let's go ahead and display that, and the ID of that text box is display. So txt display dot text equals something like token number, and where is the token number? That is token number to be served. That variable contains it. Convert that to string. So token number 4 or 5, whatever, token number 5, please go to counter 1, because this is the button next to counter 1. So that's what is the message that we want to display. And finally, what we want to do, we want to look at that we have dequeued the token number from the queue. So at that point we should also remove that item from the list box. Okay, so I'm going to call now this method add tokens to list box, and then we give it the token queue. So let's pass the token queue, and that method will take the responsibility of looping through each item within the token and then adding it to the list box. Okay, now similarly we need to write the same kind of code in button 2, button 3 as well. So let's go to button 2 and button 3. Alright, look at this. Now I need to have a similar kind of code here in button 2 click and button 3 click. So what we basically can do here is, there's only two things that are differing in this code. That's the counter number, and what else is changing? The text box in which we want to display the message. So when I click this button, we want to display the the token number within this text box. Okay, when I click this text box, when I click this button, this text box. So the variable factor is the text box where we want to display the token number, and here the number of the counter within this text box to be displayed. So what I'm going to do is extract this into its own function and then pass those variable pieces as parameters so that we can reuse this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that and then probably have a private function here. So let's call it private void and something like serve next customer. Give it any meaningful name you want. And then the first thing here is I'm going to have a text box control. Maybe let's call it text box. And then the next thing is the counter number, int counter number. And then I'm going to paste that code here. Okay, and then look at this, we have hard coded the text box name here. Instead of that, I'm going to pass the parameter. So textbox.text, and here also textbox.text. Okay, the next thing is, again, we don't want to hard code the counter number. So what I'm going to do is get rid of that hard coded value there and then append this counter number to that string. So now we can reuse this function. So I'm going to invoke this function inside our button click events. So button 1 underscore click, let's call this serve next customer, and which text box we want to pass? We want to pass txt counter 1, and what is the counter number here? Counter number 1. So similarly, let's invoke this function here, and let's specify the counter number as 2 and the text box number as txt counter 2, and similarly here. Alright, so with these changes, let's go ahead and run this and see if it works as expected. And one more thing is, let's set the width of this list box control so that it looks a little neat. We already have set the width. No, we haven't. So let's set it to 100 pixels maybe. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this now. And look at this. There are no items within the queue. Now when I click this next button, look at that, it displays this message, no customers in the queue. So when I click print token, so it starts at 1. And look at this, there are no customers before this token number. That's why it says there are 0 customers before you. Okay, so we get the respective message there. So we have 4 tokens here. Now when this representative clicks the next button, look at that, token number 1, please go to counter 2. There's no space here between token number 1 and the word please. To achieve that, so where are we doing that? Right here. So let's give a space, let's run that again. So there are 0 customers. Let's print the token numbers. So when we click this, look at that, token number 1, please go to counter 2. Okay, and similarly when this representative clicks the button, token number 2, please go to counter 3, and token number 2 is displayed there. Similarly when we click this, when this person clicks that, look at that, token number 4, please go to counter 4, and we don't have any token numbers within the queue. When this person clicks it, no customers in the queue. Similarly when this person clicks, we get the same message there. In the meantime, if there are new customers coming into our office, they click this print token, look at that, it remembers the last token number that was issued. The last token number was 4, now it is 5. So as I clicking that button, look at that, new token numbers are issued, and then they're added to this queue. Okay, so when I click here next, we should get token number 5, and when I click this, token number 6, token number 7. Alright, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.